Vince McMahon may be one of the most intimidating figures in wrestling history, but there are those who still don't really mind saying nah when faced with something they just don't fancy doing. This can be problematic when WWE has already plowed ahead and advertised a match or appearance publicly though. It's even worse when those dates are circled for a major TV special, pay-per-view, or international stadium show. Wrestlers saying no forces WWE to alter their plans and come up with something else, for better or worse. I'm Gareth from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 11 things WWE announced then wrestlers said no. Number 11. Roman Reigns pulls out of Mania 36. Here's a biggie from the off. Why wait? Roman Reigns challenged then Universal Champion Goldberg for the title on the 28th of February 2020 SmackDown. Throughout March, WWE set about the task of hyping the mega match as one of the biggest showdowns in WrestleMania history. Then, suddenly, it all changed, and Reigns was removed from the pay-per-view. Braun Strowman was announced as Goldberg's new opponent on the 3rd of April, and fans the world over scratched their heads. That's when news leaked that Roman had taken himself out of the frame due to ongoing fears about the COVID-19 pandemic. And it must be said again that Reigns deserves credit for turning down a huge payday, prioritizing his health and keeping his family safe. He said no to Mania 36 and probably doesn't regret it. WWE were left with no other option. They had to promote Braun as a serious threat to Bill's belt and pretend the match was just as big as Reigns versus Goldberg. Fans, of course, knew the truth, but Roman pulling himself out was not WWE's call. Number 10. Rick Rude ditches Survivor Series 1990. Behold this promo picture for Survivor Series 1990, featuring Dino Bravo, Earthquake, Rick Rude, and the Barbarian. Those men were supposed to team together on the pay-per-view against Hulk Hogan, Jim Duggan, Big Boss Man, and Tugboat, also known as the Hulkamaniacs. How original. Rude left the WWF due to a dispute over his pay shortly beforehand though, which meant Haku was drafted in as a late replacement. In storyline, kayfabe president Jack Tunney also stated that Rude's unsavory comments towards Bossman had landed him a hefty fine and suspension. Yes, that was a bit of a flimsy excuse for this no-show. In reality, Rude had walked out on the company completely, and fans wouldn't see him again until he showed up as an insurance policy for D-Generation X in 1997. The ravishing one, who was a notoriously fiery figure, had been disillusioned by some of his recent payoffs. That led to a falling out with Vince McMahon and ultimately ended his first run. Number 9. Akeem leaves before the same show. Rude wasn't the only one to no-show Survivor Series 1990. The WWF started shooting promo pics and putting match announcements together months before the November pay-per-view. Remember when WWE had plans for things in advance? Ha! Crazy. By October, Akeem decided he wanted out of his contract. His departure left a sizable hole in Sergeant Slaughter's mercenaries team for the event. Slaughter brought in Boris Zukov to fill Akeem's spot late on, and it was he who teamed with Sarge in the Orient Express against the Bushwhackers Tito Santana and Zukov's old partner Nikolai Volkov. Being honest, Akeem wasn't quite as huge a miss as Rick Rude had been earlier in the card. When asked to clarify what happened on his podcast, Bruce Pritchard said that Akeem simply wanted time off to rehab some injuries. He'd been running hard, first as One Man Gang and then as Akeem for years, and he fancied taking a break from the WWF's punishing road schedule, and you cannot blame him, can you? Number 8. Kevin Nash can't travel to Raw 25. Kevin Nash was one of the first names announced for WWE's Raw 25 celebrations in the Old Manhattan Center. He was due to appear alongside pals like Scott Hall, X-Pac, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels inside the quaint venue. But then pesky health problems got in the way. The ex-Diesel tweeted out an apology to fans expecting to see him in Manhattan 4 days before the show, and revealed that knee replacement surgery he'd undergone the previous December would keep him out. Nash described flying with his knee in that state as self-inflicted torture, and said he'd see everyone at WrestleMania. It's likely that WWE still wanted him to appear, knee injury or not. Nash wouldn't have been doing anything physical on the Manhattan Center portion of the night anyway, but he simply didn't want to travel. The bummer here is that he'd already been announced on TV and via WWE's official website for weeks. Michael Hamflett must have been gutted. Number 7. Sid says no to Raw reunion. It's a similar story here, minus the knee injury to be honest. Psycho Sid was advertised as one of the legends returning for WWE's Raw Reunion episode on the 22nd of July 2019. Then, come crunch time, the former world champ was nowhere to be seen. Some fans instantly fired up Twitter to ask where Sid was, and why he hadn't appeared as promised. Dave Meltzer revealed on Wrestling Observer Radio that the legend had been pulled out of Raw Reunion a few days before it happened. WWE apparently didn't think that anybody would mind if he no-showed, but they kept advertising him amongst all the other oldies for a cameo appearance in Tampa regardless. Meltzer also added that Sid just decided not to go in the end. He'd come to an agreement with WWE management beforehand, but nobody told the fans that. Suppose it sucked to be a Sid stan that night. Number 6, The Ultimate Warrior ignores house shows. This, like everything with Warrior, was rather convoluted. The Ultimate One was supposed to be a top draw on house shows in late 1996, but skipped them without telling the WWF he wouldn't be there. Naturally pissed off about this, Vince McMahon decided to pull Warrior from a planned 6-man tag at the upcoming In Your House 9 pay-per-view. The company called up Sid to see if he was available and had him work some of the live event dates instead. After that, they decided to stick him in for In Your House too. Warrior was out, Sid was in, and the match quality was barely affected. As always, the likes of Shawn Michaels and Owen Hart looked after that side of things. Warrior had effectively said a big fat no to the WWF's house show plans, and they weren't about to reward him with a pay-per-view payday because of it. Number 5, Bret Hart pulls out of a HBK rematch. Think Warrior was convoluted? Bret Hart just said hold my beer to that. The WWF briefly promoted a much-anticipated WrestleMania 12 rematch between the Hitman and Shawn Michaels for King of the Ring 1997. As explained on TV, Shawn would have had to beat Bret within 10 minutes, and all Hart's Foundation pals would be handcuffed to the steel posts outside of the ring. Plans were torpedoed for multiple reasons. Firstly, Hart decided to undergo knee surgery shortly before King of the Ring, which would mean the 10-minute time limit stipulation was only in place to protect him. That made the match a tougher sell anyway, but these lads were not done there, no. Shawn's controversial Sunny Day shoot comments angered Bret sufficiently, and that may have caused Vinnie Mac to step in and cancel the match outright. Perhaps he didn't trust that Hart wouldn't beat the crap out of Michaels for his cheek, and so elected to promote Shawn vs. Steve Austin instead. Not a bad alternative. Number 4, Hulk Hogan won't wrestle Bret Hart. Pre-internet, most wrestling fans got key information from magazines or printed newsletters like the Pro Wrestling Torch and Wrestling Observer. For casuals, WWF Magazine was a must-buy monthly that'd maybe drop hints about what the Federation had planned next. In July 1993, that's exactly what happened, or so people thought. The issue seemed to suggest that Hulk Hogan feuding with Bret Hart over the summer was a given. Hart also disclosed in his book years later that he was originally supposed to work with Hulk for the WWF title at SummerSlam. That all changed when Hogan dropped the strap back to Yokozuna at King of the Ring 93 instead. Bret also revealed that Hulk didn't want to work with him, and went out of his way to kibosh any chances of the match happening. Weirdly, the mag waited until the July issue to discuss a possible showdown between Hulk and Bret. That was presumably written/printed before King of the Ring, which would explain the editor's excitement about a huge championship clash that Hogan later turned down, because he's a dick. Number 3, Miss Elizabeth knocks back implied nudity. This is very much a case of depending on who you believe. Pre-WrestleMania 8, the heel duo of Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect promised to show nude photographs of Miss Elizabeth on the big screens if Flair beat Randy Savage. The meddling twosome also doctored staged pics of Liz and replaced Savage with the Nature Boy to further the story. Bruce Pritchard sidestepped this issue on his podcast a while back, and brushed off the idea that nude photos would be shown as rumor and innuendo. Is there a chance that the company were going to go for it and show censored snaps before someone said no? Possibly. It's certainly possible that Savage and Elizabeth were horrified by the thought, and shut it down after hearing on-screen claims from the heels. The WWF had previously pushed things a little with Liz, and leaned more on her sex appeal, so it wouldn't be that outlandish to imagine they wanted to go there again. Would you put it past them? Number 2, Steve Austin doesn't work with Coach. You probably remember nothing from Taboo Tuesday 2005, and that is completely fine. That would not be the case though had WWE's original plan been carried out. In fact, Taboo Tuesday might have become infamous for one baffling reason. Get this! Steve Austin was reportedly booked to do the job for Jonathan Coachman on the pay-per-view. Understandably, Stone Cold said F that and took himself out of the mix before the 1st of November 2005. The match had already been announced on Raw by that point too. It revolved around Austin winning back Jim Ross's Monday night commentary job and sending Coach a packing. But WWE fancied penning a swerve by having the announcers shock the world with a surprise win. And Austin was not having any of that. It's unbelievable to think that his final match to date could have been a short loss to Coachman on some B-level show, and that WWE wanted Steve to come out of retirement to do the JOB for a heel announcer. In the end, Batista ended up replacing Austin on the pay-per-view. Oh, and for the record, he won. Number 1, Daniel Bryan won't go to Saudi Arabia. Daniel Bryan became the new number 1 contender for AJ Styles' WWE title when he toppled The Miz at Super Showdown 2018 in Australia. That, according to the commentators, bagged Dan a guaranteed title shot against AJ at Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia. Later, then SmackDown GM Paige made the match official on TV. That collision was hyped throughout October, but the Saudi fans never actually saw it. Bryan was disgusted by the Jamal Khashoggi murder and decided he wouldn't be traveling over for Crown Jewel at all. That forced WWE to push the title bout with Styles forward to the 30th of October episode of SmackDown. Samoa Joe stepped in to replace Daniel at Crown Jewel, and AJ retained. To top it all off, Bryan then won the title and turned heel on the 13th of November edition of SmackDown, after socking Styles in the balls. WWE never mentioned the Crown Jewel change again, and the new Daniel Bryan began another career highlight run at the top. And that's our list. Know of any other things WWE announced then wrestlers said no? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button. Also, be sure to head on over to whatculture.com and find some more incredible articles just like the one this video you're watching is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Thank you as always for clicking on this video, and I'm sure I'll see you very, very soon. Bye bye!